It is a tight stage. I empathize with one of our earlier speakers this morning who's worried about falling off. So, good afternoon. Thank you, Eric. The conundrum I had in developing this presentation as the member of the panel who's to deal with nutrients was carbon or nitrogen. Okay, so we know, carbon is driving the world, climate change. We've heard of all the issues surrounding it in health earlier today. However, I did select nitrogen simply because of its broader range of effects than simply than the climate change issue. So just for those who may not be as familiar as others with nitrogen, so it's an essential plant and human element. It forms the backbone of amino acids and proteins and is responsible for all of us and all of our food. Our atmosphere is comprised of 78% nitrogen gas, which is largely inert. And human activity, though, fixes more atmospheric nitrogen into reactive nitrogen forms. So reactive nitrogen is what I'm going to be focusing on today as the pollutant that I'll be addressing. And so there's more reactive forms generated by human activity than all other natural processes combined. What's reactive nitrogen? It's bioavailable nitrogen. We've heard that bioavailable term before. Photocatalytic nitrogen, radioactive nitrogen. It's largely our inorganic nitrogen that is plant available, human available, and available to our ecosystems. Since around 2005, we've been generating more than 200 million tons of reactive nitrogen a year. So what are the consequences for human health? Well, their consequences range from those that are well documented to those that are theoretical. And I've listed in 3 different categories: those that affect us through air pollution, those that affect us through water pollution, and those that affect us through indirect ecological feedbacks. So in terms of air pollution, we have formation of these reactive nitrogen oxides, and they themselves can be health impacting, or they can cause the formation of ground level smog or ozone, which can also be human health. This work is very well known, not subject to any conjecture, causes respiratory, cardiovascular diseases, and viral infections. In terms of water pollution, this is an area that's, while it's continually cited as by soil scientists and as agronomists as the reason for preventing leaching and preventing nitrate contamination of groundwater, there are a lot more questions about these consequences. Questions about the negative effects of nitrate per se, and questions about the formation of nitrate and its effects on human disease. So, of course, methemoglobinemia is always cited as a reason for excess nitrate in groundwater. However, the research on this is not, let me just say, the research is still in question. And while we know we can salivate nitrite, it's the greatest source of nitrite in our body that we salivate, and it can impact in terms of methemoglobinemia people whose gastric stomach acids are not well developed, like infants. We largely don't see this effect in adults. In fact, the previous work on even infants found a better association with microbial pathogen activity from manure mixed with the nitrate, which has been said to be more of a cause of the methemoglobinemia than just the nitrate itself. But there are also other relationships, some not extremely well developed, between nitrate and human health. such as cancers, including non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and reproductive disorders. In regards to indirect ecological feedbacks to health, we have nitrate, ammonia, nitrogen, nitrous oxide. So we know these are, again, circling in our system through the nitrogen cascade. They've been associated with mosquito larval abundance, harmful algal blooms, and climate change-induced disease vector proliferation and abundance and pollen production. So I'd like to use this conceptual model as developed by Townsend et al. As a basis for proposing some future research. So we have three colored lines on this. The first and the y-axis is the effects on human health, the extent of effects on human health. The x-axis is the amount of nitrogen that's fixed and used. So first, if we can just focus on the blue curve, as we increase nitrogen fixation, resulting in fertilization and increased crop yields and increased nutrition in plants and animals, we see a positive effect of the increased human N fixation. Concurrently with that positive effect are these negative effects that I mentioned, that of air and water pollution and potential ecological feedbacks to disease. So when nitrogen fixation is low and the beneficial effects are increasing slowly or increasing fast, we don't see great effects on air and water pollution. But eventually, when the beneficial effects plateau, we see these effects. So the net effect is that we see a beneficial effect on N fixation early on and then decreases with time. So let's look at some reductions in health problems that are associated with changing nitrogen cycle that are possible. Fertilizer N addition is the single largest alteration of the nitrogen cycle. CAFOs, or concentrated animal feeding operations for meat production, is dependent on cheap and abundant N fertilizer. However, changing an American diet has been proposed by lowering meat production and consumption may reduce health impacts of the N cascade and also detrimental impacts of excessive meat consumption, which we know can also lead to health impacts. So this figure here shows an increase in fertilizer use, teragrams, that's trillion grams per year, and then 4 different alternatives that could be modeled. If we continue to increase grain imports, much of it going for meat production, we'll see a high increase in fertilizer and consumption and with its concomitant problems. At constant grain imports, we have a slightly less effect. And then if we switch to constant imports with 2 European diets, the Swedish diet and the Mediterranean diet, we could see an actual reduction in reactive nitrogen in the environment. So finally, just the proposal for research. The research that has been done so far, the types of research that I talked about earlier, what we know about nitrogen and soils and what we know about the human health are largely disciplinary kinds of research. What we're proposing here is quantification of transdisciplinary research, relationships between ag systems, sources and sinks of reactive N in the environment, the human diet, and disease prevalence to identify major beneficial changes to recommend. The subject matter team will consist of people in agriculture, medicine, ecology, statistics, modeling, and yes, even social scientists. I like the metric system, so I selected 10 as the number of years. And all I know is the figure of dollars is much too great to include on here. I've listed possible sources of funding: USDA, NSF, NIH, U.S. Department of Commerce. And with that, I'll turn the podium over to the next speaker.